Hi, and welcome to my channel, Kaylin May. I'm Kaylin, obviously, and today we're doing the best books of 2020. If you are new here and you would like to stick around, feel free to subscribe. And if you like this video and want to leave a comment, have you read any of these books? What were your top books of 2020? Please let me know in the comments below. I have a list that does have my top 10 books, and it was so hard to narrow them down because I read 81 books, I think the final count was, in 2020. And so I picked my top 10, and then I have my top YA book and my best series, because I actually read a few series in their entirety this year, or last year, and I also read a few YA books. There's a mix of fiction and nonfiction on this list, and we'll go from 10 to 1. I worked really hard to try and rank them, which was so difficult, but I'm pretty thrilled with my reading from last year. Okay, drum roll please. In position number 10 of the best books I read in 2020 is Where the Crawdads Sing. So I read Where the Crawdads Sing in the early part of last year, right when the pandemic started, in about March, I think, or April, and I loved it. It takes place in North Carolina on the coast. It's just one of the most beautifully descriptive books about nature. It has a main character who you really feel for, who you really root for, and just shows her overcoming obstacles in a really profound way, while also having her own way of moving through the world that in the end benefits her. It's like this idea of being yourself and also of striving towards greatness. It has a murder plot, it has a love plot, there's intrigue, there's romance, there's absolutely gorgeous descriptions of the swampy coastline, just absolutely gorgeous. It was an exceptional book. In number 9 we have Beach Read. So this was one of the first, and I guess few, romances I read this year, but let me tell you, it was oh God, 5 out of 5. It had everything I wanted. It had this sort of vaguely enemies to lovers, not intensely enemies to lovers, but like vaguely enemies to lovers. It has sexy scenes, if that's what you want. It gets a little steamy in there. It is fun and fast-paced, and it also actually deals with like grief and the emotion of losing someone, and the emotion of somebody not being who you thought they were, someone who you love not being who you thought they were, and kind of parsing through what that means for you, how you can forgive them or not. Really interesting family dynamics. And then it follows 2 writers who are in neighboring beach houses who do have a bit of a history with each other. One is writing a very literary novel, and the other one is writing a more fluffy romance novel, and then they're each struggling to meet their deadline, and so they switch genres and kind of have a little bit of a competition going about who can write the better book in the other person's genre. And this not only, of course, inevitably brings them closer together, but it also helps jumpstart their creative juices and puts them back on track in terms of their writing career. So it is really smart, it is really funny, it is steamy. You get like the chemistry between the 2 main characters is there. There's character development. So this was a really great one. It kind of reminded me of Sarah Dessen. I used to love reading her growing up. The Truth About Forever is one of my favorite YA books of all time. And she also deals with like grief and loss and coming of age and all of these things in a way that I think just marries the like kind of fun, flirty love story and grounds it into like reality. So I would highly recommend this. I'm gonna reread this at some point and just enjoy it. Okay. Number 8 was The Glass Hotel, which is a book by Emily St. John Mandel, who is the author of Station 11. And when I read Station 11 years ago, I was completely blown away by it. And actually, that is a pandemic book if anyone wants to read it. But The Glass Hotel was stunning. It was gorgeously written. I love how Emily St. John Mandel writes. She's one of my favorite authors. And I just thought that, like, not only, again, the descriptions of everything, I think I love a good descriptive book, but also it was bleak. There were morally ambiguous characters. People made choices that were really complicated. I loved the main character, and I loved the, like, rural Canadian wilderness setting. There's a Ponzi scheme. It's wild. It's a wild book, and it's somber, and it is a little depressing. Like, this is not a happy-go-lucky book, but I just thought by the time I got to the end of it, I was just so taken with it. It's another book I want to read again. Also, the cover is so gorgeous. Number 7, talk about another gorgeous cover, is Children of the Land, by a memoir by Marcelo Hernandez Castillo. And this book, I can't call every book beautiful, but God, this book was written beautifully. So Marcelo Hernandez Castillo is a poet, and you can tell that he's so lyrical in how he writes. And this is a memoir describing his life as an undocumented immigrant in the United States and his family's life. And it is beautiful and intense and moving. It's deeply moving. God, yeah, read it. Read it. Here's a little bit of the blurb, but I just think this is true. Children of the Land distills the trauma of displacement, illuminates the human lives behind the headlines, and serves as a stunning meditation on what it means to be a man and a citizen. This book was so good. And my friend Alisa gave it to me, which made it that much more special. So thank you, Alisa. And again, can we just, like, are you kidding me? Gorgeous. Number 6, The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi. And I mean, again, cover. Hello. This book is heartbreaking, and I'm noticing a theme, like Where the Crawdads Sing has some elements of sadness to it, although ultimately it's an uplifting book, I think. Beach Read, obviously kind of a feel-good book, although it has some undercurrents. Glass Hotel, we're getting kind of stark. Children of the Land, definitely intense. Death of Vivek Oji. Oh, what a heartbreakingly wonderful book this is. It follows it follows the family of Vivek Oji and his friends after he dies. Like, you find out in the title even that he has died, and through piecing together what has happened to cause his death, who did it, how it happened, why, his family and his friends start to uncover who Vivek was. And it's this stunning story of love and of being who you are, even in a world that doesn't accept you, and in overcoming increasingly difficult odds. It's a story about mental health. It's a story about sexuality, and it is absolutely gorgeous. It is absolutely gorgeous. And just this idea of, like, grief, this idea of wanting someone to be who they were in your head versus who they are in reality. I just read this book, and it's beautifully written. It's really beautifully written. Then the next book was Miss Iceland, and this was a book I actually got from NetGalley, so thank you, NetGalley. It follows, again, this theme of being who you are, even though the world doesn't necessarily accept you yet. It follows this woman in Iceland who wants to be a poet and who is actually a great writer. And she is kind of set up against this very patriarchal society. She's in a relationship with this man who wants to be a poet, who's sort of holding her back and pulling her down. And even though she's the more talented of the two. And it's called Miss Iceland because she's told that she's very beautiful and she should go to be in a beauty pageant instead of writing. And she has this beautiful friendship with this man who is gay in Iceland at this time, where it was not accepted or potentially even illegal. And he is struggling to find his place in the world and to be who he truly is. And so it's figuring out how to support those that you love even when they don't conform to society standards, to see the goodness in people, the trueness of them, to see their talents and their passions beyond what society has given them as what they can do and be. And it's about perseverance, and it's about love in different ways than a romance. And it's striking. And I haven't read many Icelandic writers, but it made me want to read more Icelandic writers and books in Iceland, because I just thought it was so dynamic and just such a meditation, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful, and I loved it. So the next book, number 4, is Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. This is a book that made my highlighter run out of ink because I was just highlighting so much. But it's a non-fiction, I suppose, book that discusses emergent strategy, which is like building a movement, building an idea, building an energy around something, utilizing what's already happening in nature. So she talks about the starlings that kind of move together through the sky, or mushrooms and fungi and how they communicate through mycelia, or meiosis, the process of meiosis. And she looks into the natural world to find processes by which change happens, by which progress is made, by which survival and thriving happens, by which we work together and we collaborate, and how we reach our goals, and then models ideas of movement building off of that. And she has sections on education and sections on movement leaders and like nonprofit spaces. But I've also been deeply impacted by it. I've also been deeply impacted by it in terms of sort of personal growth and how I come to make decisions about what I want to do with my life, or what comes next, or how do I let my life emerge, and this groundswell, and this, I don't know, this different way of being instead of a very linear way. It's a different way of being, and it's definitely made a very large impact on me this year. Top 3. So, in the 3rd spot, we have The 5th Season by N.K. Jemisin. Holy shit. I actually read this entire series in 2020, and I also read The City We Became in 2020. So I read 4 N.K. Jemisin books. And oh my goodness, I loved this. I loved this series. I spent the whole time flipping to the front to see the map. It was a book where you're constantly checking the map, and then it has this great appendices at the back. I actually even have it dog-eared because I would flip to it so many times. That is almost it's a glossary of terms in her magical world. I just thought the world building was so exceptional, kind of, I guess, exceptional. This is a fantasy novel that doesn't hold your hand. It just is in the world that it is in, and you have to kind of figure it out. You have to check the map and check the glossary and learn what things mean. And I think at first it was really challenging. I had to constantly kind of, as I've been saying, flip back and forth and try and remember things and figure out what was happening and by who to who was this person. It also has chapters in the second person, which I thought was really interesting. But once you understand what's happening, it is so rewarding to read, and it is a true futuristic dystopian fantasy epic. I just couldn't help but keep thinking about it after I finished reading it, and immediately read the sequels. which I again highly recommend. I would say the first and the third were my favorite. The second was good too, but I want to reread this. I want to reread this knowing everything I know from the future, and I just think this is a book that you can keep going layers and layers deep with and get more and more from. I also thought like the representation in this book was incredible. The way she crafts characters who have a wide range of like gender identities and sexualities and races, and it's done in a way that just feels very natural and just like easy almost, that it just is. There is no big fanfare around it. There's no real, like, that's not the plot. It just happens to be that way because the world is diverse and there are just people who behave and exist in multiple ways, and the things that may have defined them in another series are just one piece of the puzzle in this one. So I just thought that was exceptional. I can use that word all the time, but this series, the Broken Earth trilogy, won 3 consecutive Hugos and is worthy of each of those, so definitely worth a read. So number 2 for me this year was Trick Mirror, which is a collection of essays by this woman, Gia Tolentino. Is almost every book on here by a woman? Yes, interesting. And this set of essays is amazing. Everything, she writes on everything from covering a sexual assault story on her college campus as a journalist, to social media, to reality TV. I mean, it runs the gamut, and I just think she's a very insightful writer. She's both intimate and brings you into like her life and her experiences, but also can write in a very overarching and communally interesting way. I thought her observations on kind of growing up as a millennial were very apropos. I thought they were very, they resonated a lot with me. And she both sort of talks about the millennial condition as someone who's obviously had a lot of thinking around it, but also as a millennial herself. And so it's less this like looking down on millennials or, oh, they have no money because they spend it all on avocado toast, and more like, this has been my experience of this, and this is my thoughts. These are my thoughts about it. So highly recommend, highly recommend. Also, Barack Obama loved the Trick Mirror and also loved Children of the Land. They were both on his best of 2019, best books of 2019. So worth a read if Barack likes it. Okay, and in my number 1 spot, a book that I am halfway through for the second time and changed my life in 2020. When Things Fall Apart, Heart Advice for Difficult Times by Pema Chodron. This book has revolutionized how I've thought about uncertainty, about suffering, about pain, about the tremendous amount of change that my life has gone through. It has helped me cope with the pandemic. It has helped me think about my future life. It has helped me process my traumas. It has helped me show up in the world in the way that I'd like to show up. It is freaking incredible. It's by a Buddhist nun, Pema Chodron, and she discusses basically what happens when things completely fall apart, and what do we do, and how do we cope, and how do we learn, and how do we grow from that? How can we be more open to that? How can we live with that? How can we keep moving forward when the world is going to completely fall apart and then come together and then completely fall apart again? And this idea of impermanence, like, it's got some good Buddhist just principles, the idea of ideas of impermanence, of suffering, of detachment, but also, and it also just has a great instruction manual for meditation. But it also just has real truths that resonate very deeply, and are given with grace and compassion and honesty. And I'm reading it for a second time with a friend, and as you can see, like, it just is so I'm just writing so much of it. Reading it at the beginning of the pandemic and reading it now, just I'm in a different phase of where my life is, and I'm dealing with maybe more uncertainty and more groundlessness and more suffering in some ways than I was when I read it for the first time. And so I think this is a book I will come back to many, many times, and for that reason it has edged up the competition to be my top book of 2020. I do want to give a shout out to the best YA books I read. So I read quite a few different YA books this year. I read the To All the Boys I Ever Loved series. I read The Truth About Forever. I read from when I was younger. I read the Hunger Games series. I read The Poet X. I read a couple of other ones, and I think Charlotte, The Study in Charlotte, which is a Sherlock Holmes one. But my favorite YA book of 2020 was Catching Fire, which is the second book of the Hunger Games trilogy. Holy shit. I have a reading vlog of reading the Hunger Games for the first time, which I'll link here. And I was floored by Catching Fire and by the whole series, and how I can't believe I hadn't read that before. And moved and just so thrilled by it. It was a book that has stayed relevant over time, and I will say the honorable mention for best YA is The Poet X. I listened to it on Audible or on audio book, and I would highly recommend that if you're going to read The Poet X, you listen to it. It's pretty short. It's like a 3-hour listen, and the author reads it, and it is a book in poem, and it is so good. It is so good. So that one gets an honorable mention, but my love of Catching Fire is such that it takes the top spot. So as I mentioned, I read To All the Boys I Ever Loved series. I read The Hunger Games. I also read The Shadow of the Wind series all the way through to The Labyrinth of the Spirits, all of the books in that, which was fun and gothic. And I read the Broken Earth trilogy, and the Broken Earth trilogy wins as my favorite series of 2020. Yay, another award. No, it was incomparable. So that is those are all my notes, folks. That's it. That's what I got. The best books I read in 2020. I hope you had a great reading year in 2020. I hope you'll continue to have a great reading year of 2021. I have some books I'm really excited to read this year, and I will catch you soon. Again, if you are new here and you haven't subscribed, please join the party. It's really quite fun. If you have read any of the books that I read and want to talk about it, I love that in the comments. Please join me. And otherwise, if you don't mind leaving a comment or liking this video, it really does help. And sharing it would be even more incredible. But I hope you all are well, truly. I hope the new year has brought some goodness into your life, and I will see you all next time. All right, bye.